Welcome to the BizGrowMojo podcast, the podcast where we get into real talk about business ownership, growth, marketing, learning lessons, and advice with real business owners. Here's your host, Ryan Amon. Now, let's get down to business.
I'm pumped to get this rolling. Let's go. 82% of small businesses that go to market never actually sell. Think about that for a second. 4 out of 5 business owners who think they're ready to exit discover they're nowhere near prepared for what buyers are actually looking for. In today's episode, I'm sitting down with Dan Mirgon, a certified exit planning advisor who's been in business strategy since 1982. Dan has started and run 5 companies, consulted with over 300 businesses, and seen exactly why most exits fail, and more importantly, how to avoid that fate. Whether you're planning to exit in the next year or the next decade, this conversation will change how you think about every business decision you make. Let's jump in.
Well, hey, I appreciate you coming on the podcast, Dan. It's great to have you on board here. Looking forward to learning a little bit about your business and how you've been able to gain some success in your business and what you have to offer other business owners. Let's start by just telling us a little bit about who you are and what your business does.
Well, the short answer is that we do business and financial strategy. I've been in that game since 1982.
Okay.
So I work with the business owner, typically in the 500 to 5 million range as far as top line revenue, who recognizes that their business is an asset that needs to be polished and built so that someday they can think about selling it. So
Awesome.
it needs to be profitable. And when I say profitable, I don't mean you can just pay your bills. I mean, when a buyer looks at you, they're going to think you're an asset they want to think about buying. You have to be healthy as an organization, and you have to be marketable. And that all is kind of the preface to say that 82% of these small businesses that go to market don't get sold in the first place. So that, to me, presents a problem, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where you come in to help solve that, right?
To the degree we can, yes.
Yeah.
Part of the answer to that, Ryan, is that most of the baby boomers, and of which I'm right in the middle, kind of got their business, how to sell a business, how to operate a business thinking back in the late 70s and early 80s when they got out of college. And I don't know if you've noticed or not, but the world has spun just a couple times since then, and things are quite different. So it takes quite a bit to kind of, somebody will go to the business broker or they'll go to the mergers and acquisitions company and say, okay, I'm ready to sell. And by and large, what they're stating is an emotional, I want to get out of this thing. But when you look at the math, they're nowhere near ready to sell for a price that anybody would accept.
Yeah.
Right.
What inspired you to start this business?
Well, I guess the business has sort of morphed over the years. In its current iteration, I had been doing probably for the last 20 years, a lot of one-on-one executive coaching with business owners and leaders, right? And I ended up in a conversation with a doctor a few years ago, and I asked him, so how long are you going to run the practice and what are you going to do afterwards? 2 very simple questions that most people should have an answer to, right? He goes, I have no idea. I don't know what it's worth. I don't know what I would do afterwards. They're going to have to carry me out of here. And I thought, okay, he's thought that through a little bit. But I also realized that I'd been hearing some version of that by most of the people that we were kind of hanging around and talking to. So I looked at the industry and I figured out. I mean, I've got estate planning and financial and management, all that kind of stuff in the background, all those credentials. But I realized there's a lot of folk out here who want to be in the exit planning space, who haven't started and run 5 companies, haven't raised money, haven't sold, haven't consulted with 300 companies. And we're a little different because of that, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm not in it for the assets under management when the sale happens. I'm in it for helping the little business guy get to the big business guy, so you can answer the question if his biggest competitor walks in his office tomorrow and says, Ryan, I want to I want to buy your company. Here's my offer. Ryan needs to be able to say, well, thank you very much, whoever you are. Um, but I know we're worth this much, and here's why. And if you can't answer that question, you're guessing,
Yeah.
and guessing doesn't get you real great results.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to come back to this a little bit more about, how you're helping business owners. But before we get too deep into that, I'd like to talk a little bit about how you're finding success in your own business, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how does your business actually make money? Is it is it a flat fee? Is it an hourly rate?
We charge a retainer on a monthly basis. We negotiate that in advance of each segment of the work we do. Multiple services have different pricing ranges. And some of that has to do with the size and complexity of the deal. Some of it is simple, straight out executive coaching, which we're still doing a lot of, pretty standard flat rate for that.
Gotcha.
Okay.
What were some of the early wins and breakthroughs that you had, like building your own business?
Well, I don't know that I would have started 5 companies if they were all wins, but um,
Rule
I
of hard
think
knocks.
learning that tenacity is a better definition for stubbornness, right?
Yeah.
Stubborn means I'm obstinate and I'm rude. Tenacious means I'm strategic.
Don't give up.
And one of the things that I learned several years ago, probably 20 years ago, was that not everybody's like me. And the more I'm allowing them to be them, the more I'm actually hearing what their challenges are. And I don't sell. Okay, I don't do peddler. I'm not here to push anything down anybody's throat. I'm here to solve problems. And if I had had me back in 1980 or 90, things would have been completely different.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some of the challenges that you face in just growing your business to this point, to where you're doing what
Well,
you're?
yeah, um, not giving up certainly is the deal. Being married to the brightest person on the planet who keeps encouraging me. I'm a high D driver guy, and if if it's not working, I tend to want to go over here and do something else. And just being able to hear from her, um, got a great idea. Let's hang in for a bit. Hang in for
Yeah,
a
it
bit.
can be hard to do.
Well, yeah, it takes sometimes being willing to listen to an external voice when, particularly guys who are driver types think we have all the answers.
Yeah, and it's hard to not know or it's hard to know sometimes when to pivot and when to hang in longer, because you don't want to spend too much time on something that is destined for failure. When it makes sense to pivot, but at the same time, a lot of times if you don't hang on longer, you won't
Yeah,
get to that point of success.
yeah, it's being able to discern micro movement versus stagnation.
Yeah.
And micro movement still is the ball is, I mean, you've seen the golf shot where it's sitting on the lip, right? Just
Mhm.
waiting. And then all of a sudden it tips over versus the one that never does.
Yeah.
If you don't see micro movement, um, sit down with your yellow pad and come up with a new plan.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. So what marketing strategies have you used in your business that you found that have worked either in the past or now?
I think that world has changed significantly in
Always is, it seems.
43 years. But things don't really change in the global sense of things. It used to be the law of large numbers, 2,000 pieces of mail a month, direct mail got you
Oh, okay.
30 or 30 or 40 leads. That was, you know, the 80s, right?
Yeah.
Technology has changed. COVID has changed. Um, just the dynamics of business has changed in that it takes a lot more. They used to say, take 7 touches before you become top of
Mm.
mind.
Yeah.
Now it depends upon who you listen to. It could be 30.
Yeah.
Okay. And just being allowing yourself to let kind of that frog in the pot stew for a bit. And, for an impatient driver type, that's tough work, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you find there's a time when maybe you first reach a customer that they actually contact you? Is there a kind of a typical timeline?
It depends on how they get to us, Ryan. To be brutal about it, I don't get a lot of direct response clients. What I get is centers of influence introducing us because
Well,
we've
oh,
invested the time. We've invested the time to have a clear understanding of what that advisor, what their skill sets are, where the boundaries are, the limits for that, and then being able to bring new, fresh, proven concepts to that conversation.
so would you say that a lot of your current business that you get now comes from referral sources? Is there anything else that you're finding is working well?
Working well or working at all? Uh, I,
Sure.
I still have, I post articles every week on LinkedIn, starting to do the same thing now on Alignable. I've kind of returned to Alignable after a hiatus. I don't do direct mail campaigns anymore. Um, somebody hacked our account and that they burned up our list.
Mm,
And if I buy a list now, most of these mail service companies want to prove that everybody opted in.
yeah.
And I'm not about to lie to anybody about that. So, I guess that was a telegram that said, "Hey, don't do that line of work anymore." But yeah, I've retired twice. It's not all it's cracked up to be. I can't sit around and do nothing, right? And I have all this experience and all these tools, and I like helping people. So that's kind of where it comes off for me. And if I can just build, the firm comfortably, and my wife and I can travel and take care of the grandkids, I'm a happy guy.
Yeah. Yeah. What more could you ask for, right?
Not have to work at all.
Well, but you said you came back.
I know. Yeah. Well, yeah, we experienced breast cancer 3 years ago,
Oh, dang. Yeah,
and
that's rough.
so part of this is she's doing fine so far right now, thank you Lord. But there's always more trips and more of this and that, whatever. So
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you.
sometimes you got to write your retirement plan in pencil.
Sure. Yeah. Erase it, come back and adjust it, pivot
Yeah.
later. Do you find anything that works particularly well once you have somebody interested in your services that seems to kind of close the deal? Any particular thing that you're talking about or doing that seems to kind of speed that process up?
I think, and I just got off a call with a new bookkeeper who just launched his practice, and this topic came up: how to differentiate yourself from all the noise, right?
Yeah, there's a
There's,
lot of
and it's getting louder every day.
absolutely.
Everybody is a label, right? You go to an event and everybody goes, "What do you do? What do you do? What do you do?" What they're listening for is the one word label they can put in their mind. You're a marketing guy, you're an insurance guy, you're an attorney, you're an investment guy. They can categorize you and move on. I started doing something the other day that's probably I'm gonna lay this out, and everybody's gonna go, "Whoa, I got to steal that." Well, free, just send me money anyway. Uh, I said, "Do you want the 2-second answer, or do you want to know what I do?" And the first time I did that, the room kind of stopped and went, "Huh?" because they weren't paying attention, right?
Interesting.
And I said, I can tell you in 2 seconds the label, and you won't know jack about Dan. Or I can spend 15 seconds giving you a high level overview. Which one do you want? And I made them choose. And it goes back to Seth Godin's book, The Purple Cow. If you've never read it, you've got to. Seth Godin is a major marketing
Oh yeah.
expert, um, brilliant thinker. But his book that he wrote a bunch of years ago now, called The Purple Cow, lays out this idea of you, let's call me a business coach, business coach, business coach, business coach, business coach, business advisor, business strategist. I'm doing ostensibly, well, I'm doing it better, but I'm doing ostensibly the same thing. But I made him stop and go. So his thesis is you have to be just different enough that people stop and go, well, what does that mean? You haven't engaged them. His picture, his mental picture, storyline is you're on vacation, doing a road trip with your family, driving through farmland and ranch land, and there's cows and there's cows and there's cows and there's cows and there's cows. And you turn a corner, go over a hill, and all of a sudden, a cow sitting in the field. What do you
Yeah.
do?
Attention.
You put on the brakes and get out and look, and you go, what the heck is that thing? You've engaged with that cow and you ignored all the others
Just because it's
simply
different.
because it's different. So do that, and you'll stop being a commodity.
So do you feel like do you go by a different label like than business coach? Do you feel like that's important, kind of that title of how you define yourself and
No,
refer?
no.
From?
Certified exit planning advisor is sort of the label de jour out of 7 different credentials we have. But what do you do, Dan? We focus on strategy for the business owner. Everybody's chasing tactics. Okay. And when you're done with the fads and the trends and celebrity worship and your Uncle Fred's advice, and you need real results, that's what we do. So I call it business and financial strategy, and they have to go together, and they're different than what you've probably heard.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
Stumped them.
Yeah. No, that's interesting.
but the point is, you're thinking about where that goes now, because everybody has this road of standard in our conversations. This is where I'm going to go. This is what they said. I can just move on to my next standard, whatever thought. And if you can't stop them, you're
Yeah.
never going to engage them.
Got to have something to differentiate to draw their attention away from just moving on and
You're still a
categorizing.
cow. You can probably get milk and leather and meat from it, right? But it's a
Yeah.
different color. Why? It creates what's going on kind of questions.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So in your business, have you found any tools or systems that really make a difference and seem to be the differentiator to help you keep things running smoothly?
For our own operations,
Yeah.
we use the same tools that we recommend to our clients. So, I mean, Outlook, all the junk that goes on with that. But I use EOS, or Entrepreneur Operating System. Comes from a book called Traction by Gino Wickman that he wrote in 25 years ago.
Is this a system?
Yeah, it's a system that's pretty much taken the business space by storm for the last 20 years. And really, it's a simple matter of creating your vision, and it makes you understand. And that system doesn't do it. It kind of goes along with my philosophy. Mission and vision and mission have to be laid out first. Vision is the strategy. Mission is the plan. And so what's interesting is I always laugh when I go into a business, and behind the receptionist wall, or the receptionist desk, on the wall is their mission statement. We strive to be. I don't care what you strive to be. Why don't you just be? Okay. So here it is. Your vision is where you're going to go. Jack Welch, when he was running General Electric, used to drive his leadership team crazy because every time they'd come up with something, his first question was, so Ryan, how does that help us fulfill our vision? Vision is where we're going to go, why we're going to get there. What are we all going to gain when we arrive? The mission then is it's kind of like we're going to go to war on this topic. What are the individual battles? What are the resources we need? That's the mission. Okay?
Yeah.
If you get that figured out and you stick to the vision, people engage with it because you're telling them about it all the time. They're going, I like
Perfect.
this. I get some of the reward at the end, right? Stop being a
Yeah.
selfish jerk and share with the people that helped you make it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I think it sounds like it helps, keep a better keeps you on track better for the ultimate goal. I think a lot of business owners kind of flounder around with their mission statements and what they're because they don't have that clarity.
And Goldman Sachs 1000 and SBDC and SCORE and all these books that you can read on what you should do, great, but they're tactics and they have to be secondary to the reason you're in business.
And
And,
sometimes the
and right,
tactics change with the times.
absolutely, but it should your vision.
Yeah,
Sometimes your vision needs to be refined.
sure.
But why am I doing this? Simon Sinek dealt with that in his book of what's your why, and your why speaks to your vision. Why am I here? What am I trying to accomplish? And I think there's myopic thinking for a lot of people. I'm going to be a businessman and I'm going to start this IT company and I'm going to turn it over for $40 million next week. Yeah, good luck, Sparky. That's
Right.
not reality. Oh, but I know this guy over here that did this. Yeah. Out of how many?
Yeah.
Why do
Yeah.
you think you're hearing about it? Because it's so freaking aberrant,
Yeah.
right? You work you. And the problem that I've seen, and I'm just going to bloviate here for a minute. The problem is everybody wants growth. Everybody wants more. Everybody.
Well, just
And yeah, it's endless and it's foolish because at the end of the day, if this is what I've been building and this thing's a piece of garbage and nobody wants to buy it, I've just sold a bunch of garbage, right? But if I build quality into the system and I maintain the quality and the relationships and the fun of working here, growth's going to happen generically. People are going to go, I don't know how you guys are doing this. How do we do this? How do you do that? You can't be us. You have to be the best you can be. Now that's a euphemism. It's a stupid statement for a lot of people, but you got to actually build quality and let the quantity come second.
yeah. People get too focused on the numbers sometimes of we have to grow to this, we have to do this. And it's like if you're not serving your customers and providing something of value to
Because we
them.
read it in a book or it was in our college class or whatever, and that's what we think is the checklist next.
Yeah,
Now,
exactly.
there's a guy named Patrick Lencioni wrote the book Five Dysfunctions of a Team. If you haven't ever read it, it talks about building trust in all the levels of your team, right? He wrote another book called The Advantage. And in that book, he lays out this idea that every business has two sides to it, a smart side and a healthy side. I don't know what kind of time frame we have here, but he
Oh,
tells
you're
me
good.
the smart side is everything we just talked about that you learned from the business school and your MBA programs and all that stuff. You've got to have it. You've got to have somebody actually doing the books who actually knows what they're doing. You got to
Mhm.
actually have quality operations and production and delivery and all that stuff. But you've also now got this other side of the business called the healthy side, and that's where there's high morale, there's high retention, there's motivation, there's this stupid little three-letter word called fun, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Companies spend 90% of their time on the smart side of their business because this is what they learned in college, or this
Mm.
is what they hear in the press. This is what this guy did. One guy represents the entire industry? I don't think so.
Yeah,
Okay. But you spend 90% of your time over here, and 80% of your success comes from the healthy side.
exactly.
Your
That's
people,
where
your
why
relationships.
your
Yeah.
employees and your customers are sticking around is that side, not the other side.
So people, when we talk to people about hiring us as an executive coach, or not even the value enhancement trying to sell the business, getting the organization under control has everything to do with getting that leader to think like a CEO instead of a busy manager or somebody who's guessing their way through their braille business plans are not. I mean, that works for blind people, but not for the rest of us, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So, does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it does. Yeah, I agree with that a lot. I think I've seen situations where, people get too focused on the other side and it doesn't help the business grow. As much as
Oh,
they
by the
think
way,
it's helping them grow, it
yeah,
doesn't.
I love the bricks in the background, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
actually wallpaper, but I shouldn't tell anybody, I guess, because it looks pretty real. It was really easy to install.
I got green too. I got green bricks, man.
All right. Well, I appreciate you, diving in a little bit to, some of your successes and some of the things you've learned. Let's talk a little bit more about, your offering and what you do for business owners. Who's the best fit for this? And I know you gave a kind of a price range, but is there like an industry? Is there a, certain type of business or personality type that fits for this and makes this work better?
Um, yes and no. Um, I'm most comfortable dealing with people who are sort of on the nearing the back half of the game. You know, they've been in the business, they've owned it, they've run it, and they see an exit coming, and they know that they've got to do something substantial to make it actually work. So I kind of break the phases of business ownership down, and I deal with the second and third. So the first one is the startup to survival, right? If you can make it out of startup and survival, you step into the second act of the play, really called significance. And this is where most people sit, and then they think they're going to step over into sale, the third phase, the third act. The problem is they're not ready emotionally and corporately. And when we say not ready, it's not just the financials. You alluded to that earlier, but there's four other areas that we call intangible capital that have to be strong. Your customer base, your staff, your leadership structure, and your organizational culture. If those five, and you add the financials to that, don't fit with the buyer, you're never going to get an offer. Okay? So I have found more comfort dealing with people who have, let's say, 500,000 of recurring revenue up to maybe 5 million. Um, they recognize that they're 5, 6, 7 years from needing to do that transaction. And so we use tools we start off typically with a DISC and driving forces assessment to figure out who that individual is. We'll ask them to do a strengths finder assessment so that they know. So now we have the core characteristics of their person. We know how they communicate and we know what drives them. And when that happened to me, I went, holy cow, that's why I'm frustrated with this kind of thing and that kind of thing. And I figured out how to adjust to that and become a little more peaceful, right? Peaceful. And then we do this sellability assessment, pardon me, where there's 30 or so questions, put the numbers in, and it gives us a report in 8 different areas on a kind of gas gauge scale. and blends it together and says if you're in the 50s and you got up to the 80s, your value would go from here to here. And it goes based on their NISC code and the industry, I guess the geography. It's a pretty reasonably valid valuation. So what I'm doing is I'm working with a lot of bookkeepers and accountant firms who don't offer valuation or business enhancement. We do that assessment for free, and then we go into coaching when it comes time to here are the holes in your boat, and if you don't want to drown,
Okay.
here's how we fix
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I know that's, the evaluation is a fairly complex factor, and you just talked a little bit about some of the, the things that go into that. But is there kind of a rough, you know, revenue-based estimate a business owner could get that, give them a little bit of an idea what their business might be worth, just, kind of based on their recurring revenue or their profit margin?
it. Trying to decide if I want to go that route or not. The reason we use this particular tool, and there's several tools out there where you can go to the web and find whatever. There are calculators on the internet where you can put the number in. I don't know that I would stand behind those numbers.
Okay.
The reason I use this tool is because it goes out to deal stats and biz stats and some of the actual transaction kind of databases based on that NASC code, revenue, and geography, and says these are the kind of deals that actually have been happening. So it's not a projection formula. It's a what's really going on the market formula, right?
Kind of like with real estate, based on what's actually sold
It's
now.
comps, right? Right,
Yeah,
in real
okay.
estate.
Yeah.
And then from there, when we add that with the components of what's going on with the rest of the organization, we can see where, the typical transaction right now is about 3 times EBITDA.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you explain how that works? What EBITDA is for people that may not know?
EBITDA is a number that your CPA is not going to explain to you, but it's earnings before income tax, depreciation, and depreciation allowances, and or amortization. Depends on the size of the company. Others will be doing what's called SDE or sales or seller's discretionary earnings. Both of them are close. The math's a little different. But the basic idea here is on your balance sheet, you got income, cost of goods sold, operating expenses, net profit, right?
Yeah.
The cost of goods sold, probably can't do much about that as far as adjusting it. But the operating expenses, that's one where you have to really take a good look at it. So
Yeah.
your CPA will give you an EBITDA, so which means your cost of goods, your expenses are high, so that your tax bill's low. Okay, so they tell you go ahead and take that, resort property in Tahoe and call it a business expense. Just make sure you get your team there once a year, right? And write it off. Go ahead and pay yourself an extra 100,000 a year, and customary, whatever. But the buyer's going to walk in and go, well, no, I'm not paying for Tahoe, and
Yeah.
I'm not paying for a puffed up salary, and or any list of oddball stupid things I've heard over the years. The plane, the
So
mistress,
some of those things that you
stupid stuff.
might recommend aren't necessarily the best for approaching the exit.
Actually, no, because what's going to happen is if I'm a buyer, we walked in and we made that offer. We're going to dig into your books, and if we dig into your books and we find fluff, what else are you hiding? Right?
Is
It
there any
kind of
way?
displays or projects an ethics issue.
Yeah. Is there any way that you would recommend to somebody that's maybe approaching the sale that they're doing everything they can to try to minimize their taxable income and that sort of thing. Maybe they're, doing some of those things. Is there anything you would recommend doing, approaching that sale or, thinking about it down the road to start changing, anything specific?
Yeah, there's a lot of different, well, not a lot. There are several different ways that you can minimize the capital gains tax on a business. Um, all of them have what I'm going to call tentacles to them, qualified business investment, things like that. You recharacterize the, the stock in your company, and when you sell it, then you've got some limitations on how you can use that money for 5 or 10 or now 15 years. And assuming that you don't do it wrong, then you do not have to pay the capital gains tax. You do it wrong, it all comes back and you pay it all at once. How do you get out of the company tax free? Give it to a charity. Simplest answer. But you better be able to prove donative intent, because the IRS will look at that as a pass through to try to save tax or eliminate the tax, hide from the tax is a better way to think about that. So there's a couple of different ways that you can pre-think and should be pre-thinking that with a qualified tax attorney when you're thinking about taking the ownership from a single member LLC or an S corp over to a C corp for a strategic purpose, right? Those
Yeah.
kind of things. And yeah, there's ways to save some tax. I, I don't know that you can get rid of all of them.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. Now it sounds like you work with a fair amount of people that are kind of approaching, maybe retirement, planning and looking to exit in that way. Do you work or see very many younger owners that are, working to plan an exit or, um, early stage entrepreneurs that are kind of focusing on that from the beginning and wanting to build something to sell that intent?
I do talk to them. I tend not to work with them, but I understand how to help. Just does that make sense?
Yeah.
So in that case, generally what's going on is they've had and I hope they don't get offended by this, but a fluke success, right? The traditional company takes years to build the success and build the value and get the thing, but the 30-year-old that has the IT connection and the idea inspired, all of a sudden, boom, somebody big comes along and says, I'm going to buy that for $5 million, right? Now they've got $3.5 million left after all the costs to get out of the business. And they're sitting here going, well, now what do I do? Well, $3.5 million is a nice number.
Yeah.
Is that the only number? If you took a portion of that, guaranteed yourself a retirement in case something else goes wrong, put the other part back into, I don't know, helping small companies do what you did or do something different. And
Yeah.
it's in that second iteration of running the business that I've seen some of these folk actually learn the difficulty of running a business, because the first one was a fluke. It happened to them. They
Yeah.
didn't. It didn't. Wasn't part of their initial strategy. It was their hope. But now you got to deal with people. Now you got to deal with, and it's not going. Flukes doesn't. Lightning generally doesn't hit twice in the same place, right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. What advice would you give, a younger entrepreneur that is trying to build a business with the idea of a sale and an exit in mind? Like that's kind of, one of
Hmm.
the driving forces. Obviously, like we were talking about, they need to have other, missions and that sort of thing. But if that's kind of their plan when they start the business is to try to build it to where they sell it, what advice would you give them going into it with that mindset?
Well, first, pat yourself on the back, because most of the folks in your high school class didn't do that. Okay.
Absolutely.
Second, recognize that your job as the owner of a business is to be a humble servant warrior. What do I mean by that? You might be brilliant, but it's the brilliance of others that's going to make it work. right? Humble servant.
Sure.
And warrior, you have to fight for the deal. You have to fight for the quality. You have to fight for what's right for the company and the people that work with you, not for you. Get rid of your Napoleon hat and make it a team sport, right? But once you've got that, you've got to really focus on what am I trying to do here? Build an operating system inside the company. Actually take a vacation the company will run. And then third, I guess, recognize the hard, cold facts of this. Half of the companies that start this year won't be at a transaction table because of either a death, a divorce, a disability, or something called a disaster. Can you spell COVID, right?
Yeah.
So think about a pool of 1,000 companies. You're now down to 500. 500 to make it. You have to realize a good portion of companies. I have a paycheck company right now. If I die or quit working, the company stops. If I have an asset-based company, I'm building a management team. I'm building something that's going to get sold and transacted.
I think we lost
at
your
some
sound there
point.
for a second, Dan.
Does that make sense?
I don't know what's going on there.
Did I lose you?
Did you happen to lose a connection or anything?
Yeah, we just
Oh,
kind
there
of
we go. There we go.
looked like one of us was taking a nap. Anyway, I don't know where I lost you on that, but what was the last thing you heard?
Let's just start. Let's just rewind a little bit and start that over if you don't mind. Um, shoot, I'm trying to.
The 45-year-old who hits the home run, wins
Yeah,
the
yeah.
series, that kind of thing. Um, there was a reason the lightning hit you. It probably wasn't your stellar personality altogether. Being the humble servant warrior says, okay, now I'm going to have to go out and learn how other business works. And so there's a lot of folks in that range who may take a roll up, or they might do, the scale up where they're going to go off and find there's a guy and his wife. I can't remember her name. What's the name of the book? Sorry,
Yeah, no worries.
there it is. Shelley Ann Robb Walling, Walling. She is a psychologist, PhD. He started and ran I guess it was some form of IT service, and it grew to this monster, and he sold it. And she chronicles the psychology challenges of selling a business and going through the deal and all that kind of stuff, and the what's after that they
Hmm.
weren't ready for. You've got to start thinking, okay, if this thing sells, who could I go help? What should I be doing? And it doesn't have to be necessarily at the same intensity level as the first one, but it could be a lot more strategic and discerning.
Yeah,
What
I
kind
think
of
a lot
people do I like working with? What kind of people
of people
don't I
would
like?
to get to that point where they can take a step back and be a little more intentional about what they're doing and structure their life a little better.
Yeah.
After that first sale.
Well, in the first sale, you'll learn a lot. Most of the people who actually do transact um, end up with some kind of earnout or some kind of challenge that they don't like. Um, very, very seldom anymore do the private equity guys walk in and write you a check, take all the liabilities, and let you go home.
Mm.
Okay.
Why is that?
So they got smart. Okay.
Lesson learned, hard knocks.
Well, if I'm in the private equity game, the last thing I want to do is assume your liabilities and your risks that
Yeah,
you weren't professional or smart enough to figure out how to deal with,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
Makes sense.
they may not even give you an offer. But in that, um, think about, so Ryan's built this company and he's got everything ready to go, except we don't know how his company runs. Maybe I need to incentivize Ryan in the deal to stick around for 2 to 3 years to help us through the transition.
Yeah.
And if we do that in a partnership kind of way, friend to friend kind of approach, that's great. But sour grapes kind of get in there for the Ryans of the world occasionally. And they go, oh, I got to stick around. My neighbor is a veterinarian. He just 2 months ago just finished his 4-year earnout.
Wow.
Okay. I mean, he had a great practice. The big guys came in and bought him out, but he had to work 4 years.
It's a long time when you're
Now he was an owner with no teeth, right? Because they were driving this. How frustrating would that be for you or I?
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah.
Okay. So you got to think about the deal in advance. What terms can you or should you accept? Sometimes an earnout's not a bad thing because I care about my team. I care about the momentum of the company. Sometimes it's a roll-up concept where they're going to buy all my stock, but they're going to ask me to put 30% back of this new company's stock that I now they're going to pay me with, put it back into the new company and stick around for 5 years so that we can take their checkbook and grow the thing, right?
Yeah.
Not a
Yeah.
bad transaction. It just depends on what you're trying to do.
Yeah. Absolutely. Do you see very many solopreneurs trying to exit?
Trying to. I think it depends on the nature of their product or service,
Yeah.
the value of what they're doing. But if they could be just considered another X or Y or whatever, um, nobody's going to give a paycheck job to. Nobody's going to buy a paycheck job company.
Yeah.
Really.
What type of like business structures do you see with a solopreneur that seem to work well for an exit?
Um, well, I don't care what their structure is as far as the nature of the corporation or LLC or whatever. I think part of that has to do with um, are they willing to be bought and brought into a bigger pool? In other words, you're good at making this, but we make all the rest of it. If we bought your stock, gave you a chunk of money and 6 months off, and made you come back and work with us, would you do that? Right? I don't think that's a bad move for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But if the entrepreneurial bug, I mean, that's an out on steroids, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But if the entrepreneurial bug is getting them to go off and start something else, they're going to be very, very frustrated.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that. Well, what would you say, is one marketing tip that, more business owners need to hear that are thinking about exiting, or even just not necessarily a marketing tip, just a entrepreneur?
Think of your business as that shiny asset that's going to be sitting on a corporate, a P&A conference room table lined up against 55 others. And why should they pay attention to yours is the question.
Yeah.
It's not that I'm ready to sell. It's that I know the value of my company. It
I think,
changes how I make decisions in operating it, doesn't it?
yeah, absolutely.
So if I think of it not just as my paycheck and the obligation I have to make sure these people get paid so I get my paycheck and get it off of me, make it more we, um, I think you're going to find a little more being the ownership in the ownership role, um, particularly with what's going on with the confidence cycles and all this kind of stuff in the culture right now. Confidence, employer CEO confidence for the second quarter just fell off the map, and I don't think that's necessarily warranted, given all the trillions of dollars that's being added to the country right now. But we're going through change, and anytime there's
Mhm.
change, everybody gets a little
Yeah.
weak,
Let's
weak in the knees, right? Man up, or woman up, or whatever you need to do. Toughen up, Buttercup, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, What advice do you think most business owners that have exited would give to somebody, um, or what to themselves if they started over? What would they do differently?
Think about the end early. Think
Is the
about how
beginning
long.
too early, or is that
No,
good?
no. I mean, remember, half of them aren't going to even get to the transaction because of those 4Ds that we talk about: death, disability, divorce, and disaster. So you have to mitigate that stuff to the degree you can. And you have to really understand the nature of your business. Are you a solopreneur, paycheck kind of company? Are you intending to sell this thing? And you can still, even in that case, document your processes and systems and have an asset that can be sold. So it's just, what is your strategy and why is it the strategy? And but if you're thinking of starting a business, lay it out in your head. What's it supposed to look like in 10, 20, 30 years, or 5 or 10, right? I mean, and if you think of it that way, you'll be a little more careful and discerning and wise when you make decisions now that could impact the then. Let me say
Yeah,
it that way, right?
that makes
Does that make
sense.
sense? Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Dan, I appreciate you coming on and answering so many good questions. I think you've answered most of the ones I wanted to ask. Quick ones. Where can people go to learn more about you and your business and connect with you?
Top right corner of the screen, mirgonconsulting.com, or the
Okay.
number 801-870-6463. I don't bite. I haven't bitten anybody in weeks. So it's okay to just have a basic conversation and let's figure out if you're wrestling with something. A likelihood I've seen it. And if I haven't seen it, it may not be a real problem.
Okay. Is there any last things you wanted to mention?
Okay. Other than start sooner than later. I mean, I like your question. Is the beginning too early? No, but tomorrow, um, the day after tomorrow is way too late. Right?
Okay.
Tomorrow might be okay because you're busy
Go
today,
later than
but
tomorrow.
a real literal 24 hours tomorrow.
Yeah.
Just
Yesterday's probably better, right?
just yeah. And I don't have your answers. I have all your questions. So let's figure out what you should be wrestling with and addressing, and how do we make this better so that you can get what you want out of the company.
Awesome. I appreciate it, Dan. Dan
Okay.
Mirgon and Associates. Check them out. Appreciate you coming on and the time. It's been great to listen to all the advice you've given and all your experience in this
My,
industry.
my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Dan. Have a good one.
You too.
You've been listening to the BizGrowMojo podcast with Ryan Amon. Make sure you like, follow, and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time on the BizGrowMojo podcast.